Good evening, everyone. I am Chris, and I am back with another Cobra Kai review. This is it. This is the finale. So we finally made it. Season 6, Part 3. As you're aware, Netflix decided to split this particular season into 3 parts. Clearly a way to get more revenue in every single month. And boosted the amount of episodes, the normal amount of episodes per season, which was 10 episodes, boosted it to 15. And they've released it subsequently over... I can't remember how many months it's been in between each one. Is it like 3 or 4 months between each part? But we got our final part, which was released on February the 13th. I actually got this finished yesterday. I finished watching so I watched the first 3 episodes on Friday, and then I watched the final 2 last night. And I was going to try and do like a late night stream last night, and I thought, well, I'll let my thoughts kind of mull over a little bit before jumping on a review to talk about it now. So hopefully we get some people jumping in the comments, because I'm really interested to hear what other people think about the finale of this one. General consensus, what I've seen online so far on like various Facebook groups and YouTube videos and whatnot, it seems like a lot of people are really positive towards the ending of this series, which is great. If you go and watch my review of my previous parts, part 1 and part 2 of these Cobra Kai reviews, you know that I haven't been the biggest fan of season 6. Really enjoyed all the other series, kind of diminishing returns very, very slowly as the series progressed. I think the series kind of peaked around season 4 for me, maybe. Although season 5 did have some great moments, and Terry Silver is an absolute joy in this series. Season 6, I was really feeling the fatigue with it, and I was actually really glad that season 6 was the final season, and they're not going to needlessly keep dragging this out. That being said, we do have another Karate Kid movie coming out this year, in May, I think it is. I think it's the end of May, like maybe May 30th or something like that, with Karate Kid Legends, with Jackie Chan and Ralph Macchio in it. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that when we get to May, but we have Cobra Kai to talk about right now. We'll talk about speculation as to whether we think that there's going to be spin-offs after this show, because as far as I'm aware, it has been quite a successful show for Netflix. But yeah, my opinions on season 6 is not Cobra Kai's finest hour. Now, there has been ridiculous shit in all of these seasons so far, and indeed in the original Karate Kid film. But season 6 just felt like it completely jumped the shark. By the time you got to the ending of part 2 of season 6, where they're doing the Sekai Taikai and it's being broadcast all over the world, and it just turns into like a half-hour punching, kicking and punching, just a free-for-all basically amongst all the competitors. And the cameras are still rolling, and there's no security there to stop it, and we're still televising all of this shit. I was just kind of out. I was like, I don't care how this ends. Let's just end it. I'm done. Which is a shame, because I hate when TV shows kind of go like that. And although you had the same writing team on board and whatever, the quality did feel like it really dropped. Maybe that's a case of that there wasn't sufficient enough story to carry it through. But with the knowledge that there were 5 episodes left, it always does go through my head of how we're going to tie all of these characters up, because there's a lot of characters in this show. There's a lot of storylines going on, and I was thinking, how are we going to tie it all up so that each character gets their own particular ending? And does this show stick the landing? For the most part. I definitely think that part 3 is a marked improvement on part 2 and part 1. That being said, I still do have an issue with a lot of the things in part 3, which we'll go into as I continue my discussion. So, how did part 2 end? Part 2 ended, as I mentioned, with a huge slanging match at the Sekai Taikai, and then one of the competitors from wasn't Iron Dragons, was it? No, it was Cobra Kai, I believe, wasn't it, with Quan? During the fight, he grabbed a knife, and then he fell on his own knife, and there was a fatality at the Sekai Taikai. And I believe that was the final shot of the season, was Quan dying. So we pick up a little bit after that. It's his funeral, and we've gone back to where we have what's her name? Is it Kim? Who's the kind of like the Lucy Liu Kill Bill kind of character in this? She's got her own training dojo, and her grandfather runs it, and he kind of looks like Pai Mei from Kill Bill 2. Like the wise old martial arts master with a long flowing white beard. Jake's editor says, how many cobras were in this episode? None. Well, there were 5 episodes, no cobras, which is a shame. There were loads of cobras though in season 3. There's a whole pit of cobras. So yeah, so this one picks up just a little bit after it. It's Quan's funeral, and we've headed back there. And this the grandfather, this brutal martial arts master, is punishing all of the students who competed in the Sekai Taikai and essentially failed. And he's kind of teaching them, again, like with the Kill Bill comparisons here, sort of like a 5-point palm heart exploding technique kind of thing. It's this particular move set where this particular sequence where you're hitting pressure points, and he's essentially doing it to punish all of his students, to absolutely cripple them. It's kind of like a chop to the neck, a chop to the side, and then it's almost like they reach in and grab their rib cage and lift it up a little bit. It's very, very strange. This series in particular, the last 5 episodes, kind of, and I guess if you look at the series as a whole, sets up a lot of plot points that really don't amount to much. It felt like they had complete character bloat at the end of this and didn't really know what to do with a lot of the characters. Let me try and find this character's name, because I keep forgetting her name. As I say, she's kind of like the Lucy Liu type character from season 6. Let's see if I can find her name. Anyone in the comments know who I'm talking about? I should have Googled this before, but you know me by now. Is it Kim? I think it's Kim. Let me check. Let me find her name. She's actually kind of like a cool yeah, Kim. There we go. So she's not happy with how her grandfather is running his martial arts school. And he's always been a very brutal master, and she's been trained essentially ever since she could walk. And she's been brought up in this very, kill your enemy no matter what kind of thing. You've got to win against all odds. It's like Cobra Kai on steroids. And she kind of hatches a plan. I thought it was going to go in a very different direction at first. So John Kreese, the big bad guy of the original Karate Kid film and in Karate Kid 3, John Kreese has kind of had a change of heart. After Quan died, a person who he barely met and barely knew, after he died, he's now had a complete different outlook on life. He's kind of reaching the twilight years of his life, and he wants some kind of legacy. He wants to make amends for all the wrongdoings he's done in all the previous Karate Kid films and every single season of Cobra Kai so far. All it took was Quan dying, one random student dying who he was barely affiliated with except for a short spell. And after that, he's like, I need to apologize to everyone, and I don't want to be the big, bad, mean guy anymore. I want to come to peace and come to terms with everything. And they were kind of setting it up in a way. I actually think the strongest episode of this particular season was the first episode of this new batch of episodes, because I've been quite down on part 1 and part 2. And I thought, you're going to have to win me over. And they were actually doing some stuff in this first episode. And I thought, okay, I kind of like where this is going. It feels like we're back on track a little bit. Maybe a little too late. I don't know, perhaps. Anyway, there's Kim goes to her grandfather, and he's kind of like, you know what you must do. You must get rid of everything holding you back in any sense of weakness. And it's kind of implied that weakness is Kreese, because he's been very vocal that he wants no part in this now, and that he's going to be leaving, and he's not going to be involved in this or getting back into the competition or resuming the Sekai Taikai. He's kind of bowing out. So it seems like the grandfather and Kim hatch a plan, or rather the grandfather tells Kim, like, you know what you must do. And I thought it was going to go in the direction that Kim was going to kill Kreese. And there's a bit, and I think that's intentional. I think that's what the writers were trying to get at. She kind of brings him like some tea, and there's a lot of knowing glances as he's drinking this tea. And you think, oh, okay, so her grandfather handed her a knife to stab Kreese, to kill him once and for all, but she can't bring herself to do it. So she's going for a more humane route, in that she's just planted something in his tea. And how it's played, it's almost like Kreese knows that there's something in the tea, but he's kind of ready to die anyway. Like he's sort of lived his glory days and he just wants peace. So he drinks this tea willingly and they have a bit of a conversation. And I think he says something about, you know, you need to forge your own legacy and you're not your grandfather and you have a choice and blah, blah, blah. And then the scene ends where she's looking quite upset. And as I say, like a lot of knowing glances, knowing that he's just drank this tea. And he says, I'm getting tired. And I thought, oh, okay, so we're killing Kreese off like this. And I didn't know how I felt about that. I still think that his complete 180 as a character is a little bit rushed. I don't mind Kreese going through a character arc like that, what he does in the show. However, I think Kwon, of all people, being the instigator of that, I don't really buy it. Because later on in the show, and probably the best acted moment in the show, is a moment that Kreese shares with Johnny, where they kind of embrace and they, you know, let bygones be bygones kind of thing. Kreese has had multiple opportunities to apologize to Johnny, especially if he's been carrying this baggage around with him all this time. And like he's been putting Johnny and everyone Johnny cares about through absolute torture in hell for the best part of 6 seasons at this point. And then all of a sudden Kwon dying is like, oh no, now I feel really bad for everything I've done. I'm like, don't buy it. Anyway, Kreese doesn't die here. Kreese lives, at least for now. And Kim confronts her grandfather and attempts to kill him in his sleep. He challenges us to a fight and he actually gains the upper hand because he's like this old, wise, karate master. And I actually can't remember. I think, does Kreese kill him? I actually can't remember. Let me have a look. I watched this a couple of days ago, guys. But he died. Oh no, I know. She does the technique. She does the fucking 5-point palm heart exploding technique. That's what she does. She can't bring herself to stab him, but she does the he kind of riles her up and gets her to that place where she does the chop to the neck, chop to the side, and grab the rib cage, and she's successful, and he dies instantly. And then I think Kreese just says, like, I've got some unfinished business. There's a few people that I need to talk to and whatnot. And that's kind of where we begin this show. Everyone's kind of reeling after the Sekai Taikai. You've got Daniel LaRusso, who's just, you know, working his day job again at the showroom. And his family kind of know there's something off in him, that he's kind of putting on a brave face. He's trying to turn his back on karate after the death of Kwon. As I say, like, the whole linchpin of everything is on Kwon. And yeah, it's a tragedy that a student died, but it was everyone before that point was trying to literally fucking murder everyone. They were all murdering each other. They're all like, you know, fist fighting, and it was a complete free-for-all. It would have resulted in a death at some point. It would have had to have. And it was just, you know, one person falling on a knife that stopped it all for some reason. So you've got him kind of reeling after the events, and you've got Johnny, who's kind of, you know, he's working there too, but you can tell that he kind of wants to get back into the game a little bit. And the one who gets them all back into the game is Terry Silver, who's really, really pissed off that the Sekai Taikai never happened, and, well, it didn't complete. And more importantly, the Iron Dragons, the team that he's backing, hasn't had a chance to win. And he's trying to get the Sekai Taikai back on track again. I absolutely love Terry Silver. I think he's he might genuinely be like one of my favorite villains in any franchise ever. And I think he's just played absolutely phenomenally. You can see a lot of actors in this show actually have kind of stayed the same and haven't really grown as you know, haven't really grown as an actor across 6 seasons. There's a few exceptions to that. I think William Zabka, who plays Johnny Lawrence, has massively improved over the 6 seasons and delivers probably one of the most emotional performances of his career, and certainly one of the best scenes in the entire show, I think, with him and Kreese. Michael Cove. Is it Michael Cove? It is Michael Cove, isn't it? Oh God, I'm terrible with actors' names. Let me have a look. Yeah, I think it's Michael Cove, isn't it? Yeah. Martin Cove, sorry. Martin Cove. Jesus, where is my brain today? But yeah, Terry Silver is played by Thomas Ian Griffith, is incredible in this show and brings that intensity. he was completely zany and wacky and hilarious in Karate Kid 3, but he's really proven himself like an incredible character in this, and I love the subtleties in his performance. And he's actually really intimidating now and like a really cool character. Every time he's on screen, I kind of straighten up like, oh my God, it's Terry Silver. What's he doing now? And he's manipulating things behind the scenes with his inexhaustible wealth. Is it ever actually said what his company was? Was it in like petrol or something, or gasoline or something? I was trying to remember what it was, because he had the Cobra Kai brand, didn't he, for a while, and opened like a whole bunch of dojos. But I'm trying to think what his business was in Karate Kid 3. It's been a while since I've seen that movie, but as far as I'm aware, it's some kind of like, I think it's like a gasoline business or something. It's never really mentioned all that much. It's just that Terry Silver has money and he can just do anything. He's everywhere all at once. You know, he's that kind of character. So he's pulling strings and he's manipulating people behind the scenes to get the Sekai Taikai back up and running. And he's kind of meeting with all of the participants in secret and sort of like planting ideas in their head, like whispers here and there of, oh, what? So this is going to be your life now? You're going to turn your back on karate? Is this what Mr. Miyagi would have wanted? And, you know, to Johnny Lawrence, he says, oh, so you're just going to be a family man now? You don't want one more shot at glory kind of thing. Anyway, the Sekai Taikai happens. And it's mostly kind of predictable, to be honest. I mean, the people that win and the fights, and there's always that kind of pendulum swing in the fights, and they overpower certain characters for a time, and then when it comes to the good guy needing to win, they completely nerf the bad guys down as well. That's something that's always happened. I try not to be too hard on Cobra Kai for that, purely because the original Karate Kid is one of my favorite films ever made. And yeah, when you boil it down to it, and they even draw reference to it in this series as well, where they say that Daniel had like a couple of weeks of training. Johnny Lawrence should have absolutely wiped the floor with Daniel LaRusso. There is no way that he would have won that competition. And I have to be mindful of that when I watch the original. It's like, yeah, it's completely ridiculous, but it's got such a heart and a charm and, you know, like good life lessons and a good message behind it, which is why I absolutely love that film so much. So, yeah, like the fact that the bad guys are clearly, you know, and the actors that they've got for them as well. I think some of the Iron Dragons, I think they are actually, I know the girl, I think she is actually like a martial artist in real life, isn't she? And it shows, like when she's in the fight, you can see like from her choreography and her moveset and everything that she's doing, that she's clearly a pro at all of this shit. And then, you know, there's some strategic stunt doubles in there for some of the characters where, you know, they're doing crazy shit just in order to keep up. But yeah, they'll overpower the bad guys. And then when we've got to have that, you know, we're over that low point and they have to dig deep and come back to the mat and fight and win, because the, you know, the good guys have always got to win. Then all of a sudden the bad guys, it's like they've never fought before and they're completely nerfed and the good guys win. One thing I was actually really surprised about with this, I feel like Robbie's character has just been shit on all the way through these 6 seasons. And, you know, Miguel's always been the favored child out of everything. Miguel's, I guess you could kind of say, is like one of the main characters, maybe. Certainly he was towards the beginning. Season 6, maybe not. He's kind of just part of the ensemble, I think, really. But man, to me, Robbie just got absolutely robbed in this show. They set him up for this, you know, this great moment, and ultimately the character does come out on top. You know, he gets a great career, very, very lucrative career. He's being sponsored by the end of this thing, but I would have actually have liked to have seen Robbie be the champion, I think, at the end. And in many ways, I think he deserved it more than Miguel, and I think he had more riding on it. But they actually do a similar beat from an earlier season where Miguel gets like his leg injured. I swear that was in like one of the earlier seasons, wasn't it? Where someone gets their... I know in the original Karate Kid film, you have the same thing happen with Daniel LaRusso. So maybe I'm thinking of that, but... Oh no, it was his spine, wasn't it? That was when he fell off the balcony at school. And then he kind of couldn't walk for a while in season 3. But I thought there was another instance in Cobra Kai where they did something where someone injured their leg and couldn't fight. And it's a really horrible break as well. And I actually did this. I said, "Oh, you need like Mr. Miyagi showing up right now, doing the magic hand trick, the massage or whatever to get him back in the fight." And they actually reference that as well and say, you know, that no massage can help this injury. It's a broken bone. It needs time to heal. So Robbie's out of the fight. And I guess it does kind of it fuels the fire for Tori's character to get in the fight and sort of get revenge. But man, I don't know. I just feel like Robbie got absolutely robbed with this. And I would have liked to have seen him get that title, to be honest. Because after that, he's kind of out of the show. And that's one of my problems with this as well, is when you're dealing with so many characters, you always have you have your main ensemble of fighters, right? In the various dojos. But you have the more prominent characters within those dojos. So Miguel, Sam, Robbie, and Tori are like your main four. And they've always been the main four. Everyone else kind of falls to the wayside in this one. Hawk and Dimitri, I mean, Hawk was a cool character and then just got really irritating for me. I fucking hate Dimitri. Every single time he's on screen, I just want to punch him. I can't stand him. So I'm just like, let's just get rid of all those scenes. We don't need them. Devon is just not in this final part at all. So Devon's ending in this series was, I guess, apologizing to Kenny for giving him laxatives and making him shit himself during the tryouts. Kenny as well. What was his ending? Kenny was a great character. And what did he accomplish in season 6? Kenny was in the tryouts, shit himself, and then made up with the person who made him shit himself. That's it. That's Kenny's character. And then he's just in the background. He got brought along to Barcelona and that was it. He doesn't really do anything. So he doesn't really get an ending either. And the same could be said for a lot of the characters. Which, you know, when you're dealing with a cast of characters this large, then I guess you do have to kind of zone in and favor certain people. Sam, as well, in this series is absolutely hilarious. So everyone from Miyagi-Do just kind of gives up and bows out, which I guess makes sense. The show's called Cobra Kai, and I actually do appreciate that the show does bring it back round to being Cobra Kai. And more importantly, it does kind of finish where it started, in that it is about Johnny Lawrence by the end of this, because it started as Johnny Lawrence was the main protagonist, and then throughout the middle of the series, like, he was one of the protagonists, but it seemed like it was much more of an ensemble scenario. You had Chosen in the mix. Of course, you've got Daniel LaRusso and everything going on with Kreese and Silver and whatnot, that it felt like the whole Johnny Lawrence focus of the show kind of diminished a little bit. But so I'm actually really glad that for the finale, and towards the end of this, we did pull it back, and it was his story, and he was the focus by the end of this, which I really appreciated. But yes, Sam does absolutely nothing this series. I've always hated Sam as a character. I think I think Sam is probably more of a villain in this than Terry Silver is, to be honest. I don't know. Nothing against the actress at all. I just find that Sam's just been a really weak character, and anytime she goes through some kind of growth, and this isn't just exclusive to Sam's character as well, the same can be said for Daniel and Johnny's relationship, in that we move the needle, we feel like we're developing them as characters, and then when we get to the next season, we just reset the status quo. And by the time we got to like season 4, season 5, and season 6, and we were still doing the thing where Daniel and Johnny would just lose their shit and fall out again over the most, ridiculously small thing. It did get a little bit irritating. And I just get the impression that they didn't really know what to do with Sam this series. So she just kind of gives up. She says, I don't want to fight. And then by the end of the series, she decides that she wants to. She doesn't tell Miguel, her boyfriend, that she's not going to college and she's going off on like a gap year, I guess, to go on some kind of fucking spiritual traveling quest around Okinawa, because she wants to follow and learn more about Mr. Miyagi and where he came from. And she doesn't tell her fucking boyfriend about this. So right before he goes out to do his final fight, Miguel, he discovers this. He finds, like, I think it's like the passport or the travel documentation or something. He sees that she's planning on heading to Okinawa. And, like, my boy's devastated, as you would be. And he's like, why didn't you tell me? And she's like, oh, I didn't find the right time. I'm like, no, you would have just fucked off to Okinawa. You're only talking about this now because Miguel's found it. So, I don't know. I just find Sam completely toxic in this show. And that should have been the end of it. Like, by the end of it, she's at the airport. She says, a tearful goodbye to her parents and her brother. And then Miguel, my boy, the complete simp he is. He's like, I know we're going to have to go our separate ways, but I decided to postpone my college plans or join later or enroll later in a couple of weeks' time because I'm going to come to Okinawa with you. And you can tell Sam's just like, shit, I wanted to go to Okinawa alone, but okay, I can entertain you for a few more weeks before we leave each other's lives forever. So yeah, I really hope they're not setting up some kind of spin-off series with Sam and Miguel exploring the origin story of Mr. Miyagi or something. No, I don't want that. I don't want any spin-offs to this. Please and thank you. Speaking of Mr. Miyagi, there is a scene in this particular series. Well, they had one in part 2 where they, with the power of CGI or deep fake or whatever, they brought Mr. Miyagi back for this kind of weird dream sequence that Daniel LaRusso had. And I thought that was going to be it. I thought that was going to be the last time that we do CGI Mr. Miyagi. And apparently not, because he's back. He's back in this, and it's a full-on dialogue scene now. A full-on, it's another dream sequence. And I don't know. I just feel like it's really in poor taste, to be honest. You have Pat Morita, apparently his family gave them permission to use his likeness and to do the whole CGI thing and whatnot, but it looks really ropey. It does not look good at all. And especially because he walks into the light and he's right in the foreground, right up close to the camera, and he has a conversation with Daniel, and the lip movements just look really uncanny and weird, and the rest of the face is very still, and it's just kind of the mouth awkwardly moving. It looks terrible. It really does not look good, and I don't know why it had to be in the show. Throughout season 6, they kind of set up this storyline where it felt like we were vilifying, we were tearing down the icon that was Mr. Miyagi, and I was really angry about that in the previous parts, in that, we did the same with Luke Skywalker. We do the same with all of these legacy characters. We have to vilify them or take away their previous exploits, or, you thought this character was a legend and a real good guy. Actually turns out they were a complete son of a bitch and, actually a villain. I hate that. I really, really hate that. And they started to do it with Mr. Miyagi, and I thought, you don't do it. You got 6 seasons into this thing where I've really liked how they've worked in the legacy of Mr. Miyagi. Like, he's always felt a part of every single season, whether it be through anecdotes from people who knew him, filling in the gaps of where we saw him between Karate Kid 3 and the beginning of this series, or that letter, the letter that Kumiko reads in, I believe it was season 3. I think it was season 3. And yeah, that's still one of my favorite scenes in all of Cobra Kai. I thought that was acted wonderfully. I thought it was a really nice tribute to Pat Morita and the character and the legacy of Mr. Miyagi within the series. But throughout season 6, there was this really convoluted explanation saying that Mr. Miyagi actually almost killed a guy and stole from him and stole a necklace from him. And did he co-partner? Did he co-own a boxing ring or something like that? I don't know. It was in like part 1 or something. It was this really convoluted story about how Mr. Miyagi, he fought in the Sekai Taikai. He had blood on his headband. He may have killed someone in the ring. He may have killed someone outside, and he was a thief and he was a common criminal. And I hated it. I hated all that shit. I was like, don't do it. Don't do it. And they kind of backtrack on it in this season a little bit. We get more clarification as to what the whole scenario was. So apparently, Mr. Miyagi's mother gave him gave him a pearl necklace. A pearl necklace that eventually Sam gets. So take that for what you will. And he brought it to the country with him, and it was like a really prized possession. And it's actually Daniel LaRusso's mom gifts this necklace to her granddaughter Sam right before she goes to Okinawa. And it starts off as quite a nice sentiment. She's like, this belonged to Mr. Miyagi's mother, and she gave it to him before he came to this country. And the whole thing really reminded me of Pulp Fiction, Christopher Walken's scene where he's talking to a young Bruce Willis, and he's about his grandfather's war watch. And it goes on, and I thought, oh, okay, so that the necklace belonged to his mum. Okay, that's nice. But then it goes on. Then when Mr. Miyagi went to war, or, you know, in the camps or something, it was taken by a guard, and then he had it, and then he somehow gave it back to him. I don't know. The story goes on and on and on. It's so convoluted. And then it goes on some more, and it's like, he got to this country, and then the necklace was stolen. So Mr. Miyagi tracked the guy down who stole the necklace. And this ties into the story from the previous two parts. And then Mr. Miyagi did what he had to do. He beat up this thief and took the necklace back. And I'm like, I get that. But also, apparently, Mr. Miyagi almost killed this guy. Now, I get that this necklace is, you know, really important to him and sentimental to him, and it belonged to his mother. I get that. But ultimately, Mr. Miyagi still did almost kill a guy to get this necklace back. So I don't know if that completely, you know, exonerates Mr. Miyagi in that story. I don't know. But it did make me laugh. I think they could have just cut that scene and just said, like, oh, yeah, this necklace belonged to Mr. Miyagi's mother, and he wanted you to have it, Sam, and when I thought the time was right, and now I feel like the time is right. They could have just done that. And I just look back on season 6 as a whole thinking, like, did we really need to do that storyline with Mr. Miyagi? It just feels like it's kind of superfluous. And then we get that fucking dream sequence in this with a deep faked Mr. Miyagi, which I just thought was really unnecessary. It started off and I thought, this can't actually be happening, can it? Because it was really ridiculous. So Daniel LaRusso's training in his dojo outside, I think. And then all of a sudden, someone's on the fog machines, and it turns into Michael Jackson's Thriller music video. And then a whole bunch of the like the skeleton outfits in the original Karate Kid film when it was the Halloween party, and like Johnny Lawrence and all the other Cobras who were dressed in the skeleton outfits, a whole bunch of those like jump into his backyard and start fighting him. And then the ghost of Mr. Miyagi shows up and starts fighting them all with Daniel. And then he comes and talks to Daniel at the very end. And I don't know, it just looked really, really bad. And I don't think they needed to do that. They could have had sort of like voiceover from the previous Karate Kid films that could have drifted in, teaching him some life lessons. Hell, if they could have got someone to do an impression of Mr. Miyagi, or maybe voice AI or something, and have some new lines recorded, maybe blending them with the original, that may have been a better way to go. Or even using stock footage. I feel like they could have just used stock footage of Mr. Miyagi and like rotoed around it, or done whatever they needed to do. I don't think they needed to resort to creepy, uncanny valley CGI deepfake Mr. Miyagi. I don't know. I think it has its place, and I think it can be done well when it's really kind of necessary to do it. I just didn't feel like it was necessary to even show Mr. Miyagi like in that way in this series, and I thought it was a little bit in poor taste, to be honest. We've got Bath Time in the comments. He's talking football. Oh no, Bath Time, you're talking a language that I don't know. I'm sorry. He says, for fuck's sake, just got beaten for the 3rd time this season by effing Spurs. Oh, my dad's going to be very happy then, because he supports Spurs. So I'm sure my dad will be really happy about that. What else can I talk about the series? Has anyone watched it? Have any of you got caught up with Cobra Kai yet? I'd be interested to hear what people think about this series so far. Let's jump back to Terry Silver real quick. So we get a bit of a revelation with the character here, which I feel like has been a fan theory since season 4, since he was incorporated into the show. There was a moment where they go to the hospital, and Terry Silver is there waiting for him. And I think he has a conversation with him in the elevator, and he says something cryptic, like, it sounds like something Jigsaw would say. He says, cherish every moment of your life or something, or cherish your life or something like that. And I remember that caused a bit of a stir in the fan community, you know, on like forums and stuff. I was seeing this, and on YouTube videos, theories about why was Terry Silver at the hospital, and why would he say something like cherish your life? And people were thinking, oh, maybe he's got some kind of terminal illness, maybe he's got cancer or something, and this is kind of like a last ditch effort. And they've never drew reference to that ever again, and that was back in season 4. And they bring it up again in this one, and he's on tablets, and he says he's basically got 6 months to live. And they show a flashback to that scene from season 4. And I kind of want to give the writers credit on this one, that they knew the plan, they knew where it was heading, they knew what they wanted to do with it. But part of me thinks it's almost like they were trawling through Reddit pages or community pages and seeing these fan theories and going, oh, okay, yeah, no, we didn't even intend. Let's do that. Let's do what everyone thinks we're doing. It reminds me of, I guess this is a spoiler alert for Saw the final chapter, which came out in 2010, whenever it was. Saw 7, which wasn't the final chapter because they've done loads more since then. But the whole fan theory since Saw 1, since 2004, was that Dr. Gordon is actually working for or working with Jigsaw. And, you know, there's a moment in Saw 2 where you see Jigsaw preparing this trap, and someone slowed it down and said, like, oh, if you look really closely, it almost looks like he's limping. And that's totally Dr. Gordon because he cut his foot off. So that's actually Dr. Gordon helping out Jigsaw and whatnot. This was back when Saw 2 came out. By the time you get to Saw 7, the writers just went for broke and just went like, oh yeah, we're not even going to explain it. Dr. Gordon's been helping Jigsaw. And yeah, that one scene where he was limping, yeah, that actually was Dr. Gordon. So there you go. And it felt so easy. And as I say, I want to give the writers of this show credit for it, that they knew what they were going to do with Terry Silver, and they had that whole, you know, terminal illness thing planted all the way back then because that's what their plan was. But part of me was thinking, have they just read what a lot of fans were kind of hypothesizing and just decided to go with that? I don't know. Bath Time says, I did wonder today if I'd welcome an adaptation of Lord of the Rings, but with the Muppets. I think I would. Oh, hell yeah. 100%. I feel like you need a human actor in there to offset everyone else. That's, you know, the best Muppet films. You got Muppets Christmas Carol, you got Michael Caine in there, and you got Muppets Treasure Island, and you got Tim Curry in there. You need the one actor in there that plays it safe. I don't know whether it would be worth having Gandalf played by a human, maybe, and then you have a bunch of the Muppets who are everyone else. Yes, there you go. Yeah, Gandalf or Aragorn as humans. Yeah, no, I agree. I'd be down for that. I'd love that. Yeah. Miss Piggy would be an incredible Galadriel. Muppets Treasure Island, where she's revealed as Benjamina Gunn, and you have like this big elaborate parade for her, and she's riding on top of an elephant. And then she's like with an anteater, isn't she? And she falls over and Pratt falls. She's like, you stupid anteater, you spoiled my entrance. I could just imagine something similar. She's at the top of the stairs, glowing white, you know, floating down the stairs and then falling down or something. That'd be funny. Oh, I don't, because now this is never going to happen. And I need a Muppets Lord of the Rings in my life now. You've put this idea in my head. That would be incredible. I'd love that. Fuzzy Bear as Sam. Ooh, okay. Let's see. You'd have, I feel like Gonzo and Rizzo would be Merry and Pippin. Frodo would have to be Kermit. And then, yeah, I guess Fozzie would make for a good Sam. Let's see. Who else? Who else would be in the crew? I feel like you'd have to have who would be Gimli the dwarf? Yeah, I was thinking like Animal as Gimli, or maybe I was thinking of like the one in Muppets Treasure Island that's like the huge one with like the fangs and he's like, are you kidding? I love you guys. But he's probably going to be too big, isn't he? And especially because he's meant to be a dwarf. So yeah, maybe Animal. Yeah. What about Legolas? Waldorf and Sandler as Nazgul. No, that's got to be oh no, because they've got to be a pair. Because I was thinking like, oh, could you do like Theoden and Grima or something as those two? But no, they're probably better as Nazgul. Yeah, Legolas as Beaker. Yeah, yeah, actually, yeah, that'd be good. Keep them coming in. Keep them coming in. We've got a comment who says, "Who would win, Johnny or Aragorn?" I think I'd say Aragorn, but I mean, in a hand-to-hand, Merry and Pippin did get the drop on Aragorn, didn't they? In the extended cut of Fellowship of the Ring, they do manage to tackle and flip Aragorn over. So in a hand-to-hand fight, maybe Johnny actually, but I think Aragorn would probably have the advantage there. To be honest, I think he's a bit more rough and ready, especially taking out Lurtz. But you know, by Cobra Kai logic, Johnny would easily win the day, even when he's horrifically outmatched. Just like the end of this show, where Johnny has to, of course, for convenience, for drama, the was it? I keep saying Iron Eagles. It's not Iron Eagles. That's another 80s movie. The Iron Dragons are tied with Cobra Kai. So Tori gets the win. That was a pretty cool scene, actually, where Kreese kind of nods at her and gives her the approval. He's almost been kind of like a fatherly figure to her as well. So I thought those moments were pretty good. And Tori wins. And Miguel wins, and you're like, yeah, woo, excellent stuff. Yeah, because Miguel fights essentially Ivan Drago. He's the guy that is a complete simp for some reason for Sam. And that's it. That is his character. He is the big, stoic, Russian-looking motherfucker who's impossible. He's like a machine. He's the best fighter ever. But for some reason, he's a gentle giant because he absolutely loves Sam. And for some reason, he's jealous of Sam because she already has a boyfriend, and I don't know. There's just absolutely nothing to his character. But you have Silver and this guy who's the leader of the Iron Dragons kind of whispering in his ear saying, oh, you need to break him, take advantage of his... because he's like British, isn't he? He's like Cockney British, this Iron Dragons guy. He's like, you need to... No, that's the Kiwi. I can't do a fucking British accent, and I'm British. What the fuck am I doing? Anyway, he's like, he reminds me of like a Ray Park, Darth Maul kind of character a little bit. It's like, his back has been broken before. Break it again. Like, punch him in the spine and take him out of the fight now. He's leading the points. Don't let this go the distance. And he basically gives up this Iron Dragons guy because he doesn't want to cause any more damage to anyone. He wants to fight on his own terms. Literally Ivan Drago, as I said, and Miguel wins. There's a cool moment actually when Miguel's fighting this the male champion from the Iron Dragons, and it flashes back to all the moments of training that Johnny gave Miguel since season 1. And, you know, there's like a bit from season 1 where he's dunking him under the water when he said he can't swim. And he says, you know, use your legs, kick your legs. You know, you can swim, just move those legs. And then it cuts to him in the match and he's like doing a kick or something. He's using his legs, like this rapid fire kick or something. I thought that's kind of cool. I like that. Once again, the fights and the choreography in this show, it's completely mired in this sort of like Zack Snyder slow-mo, fast-mo kind of stuff, which may have been a part of the earlier seasons. I actually can't remember. It doesn't seem like it was a part of the old Karate Kid movies, but to me, it just takes out all the fast intensity of what's going on. It felt like every other shot was, you know, someone's about to do a punch, and it's like, bang, and then another slow motion thing. And it's fine if you sprinkle that through, and it can be really cool and stylistic to do that. But when it's like every few seconds in the fight, it really got on my tits after a while. But anyway, so Cobra Kai win the male and the female championship, and it's all points based, right? So yes, they've won. Cobra Kai's essentially won, but I think it's Terry Silver pulls some strings maybe, and it goes to points or something like that. And conveniently, Iron Dragons is tied in points with Cobra Kai. And in Sekai Taikai history, of course it is, The only thing that can tip the balance as to decide who wins is that the master from each dojo must fight together in a final match. So you have Johnny Lawrence for Cobra Kai fighting the guy from Iron Dragons. Now, this guy from Iron Dragons is built as shit. And again, I don't know much about the actor, but I get the impression that he is actually a martial artist, like he looks like it. And in the locker room before they go out to fight, he pretty much overpowers Johnny almost instantly, and he's kind of got his arm twisted behind his back and he could break his arm. He says, like, even now I could break you, but I'm going to wait until we get out there on the mat so that the whole world can see, so that your wife can see what a failure you are, and your newborn daughter will grow up to know that her father is a loser. And this completely demoralizes Johnny. He gets out there. He's scared of his opponent. He's afraid. Again, it's like, is that, it's Rocky 3, isn't it? It's like, I'm afraid. All right, you want me to say it? I'm afraid. When he goes up against Clubber Lang. So Johnny's just getting his ass kicked, and it goes back to the rules of the original Karate Kid film where it's 3 points. So 3 points of contact, and you've won the match essentially. And the leader of the Iron Dragons is 2-1, I think. And then Daniel, who's in Johnny's corner, he keeps calling a timeout, and I was like, I don't know much about martial arts and karate. Can your sensei say, hey, timeout? Can they call a timeout, or does it have to be decided by the referee or the judges? I don't know. I don't know how it works. So I feel like he calls like 2 or 3 times out. It's crazy. And he just says, like, okay, I've given you the pep talk and it's not working. So I'm going to give you a pep talk that will, that you'll be able to understand. Fear does not exist, does it? And he's like, no. And he gives him like the spiel that John Kreese does in the first one. Was it like, failure does not exist in this dojo, does it? No, sensei, like that. And he gets him back in the fight. And then once again, the Iron Dragons, who's the leader of the Iron Dragons, who's an amazingly proficient fighter and incredible, who easily overpowered Johnny Lawrence before this point. Now the pendulum swings, and all of a sudden it's like he can't fight at all because we have to have Johnny win. And it builds up. It builds up to like that final move. It's like 2-2. And then whoever gets the next point will win the Sekai Taikai. And the music's building, and it's doing flashbacks to the old shit, and it's great. And I was like, okay, well, obviously Johnny's going to win. It's going to happen. But the music's building, and it cuts to the match that Daniel had with Johnny, where Daniel's getting ready for the crane kick. And Johnny's like squaring up, and it cuts to him sort of like adjusting his stance and whatnot. And I thought, holy fuck, are they actually going to have Johnny do the crane kick, the same move that cost him the match all those years ago in '84? And is he going to use the same move now to take out the Iron Dragons guy? And it's building, and it shows it, and it cuts to the old footage of Mr. Miyagi sort of nodding at Daniel, and then it cuts to Daniel doing the same nod at Johnny. I'm thinking it's going to fucking happen. They're going to do it. And he doesn't do the kick. He does sweep the leg. So he uses the move that Kreese told him to do, the illegal move apparently in the original Karate Kid film. Now it's a move that's completely fine. So he sweeps the leg. But then he wins with just this really anticlimactic backhand to the face, I think it is. And I just thought, would I have done the crane kick? I probably would have. I probably would have just, member berries. The show's done a shit ton of that at this point. So if Johnny Lawrence had have beaten the Iron Dragons guy and won the day essentially with the kick, it would have been really massively cheesy. But this is Cobra Kai we're talking about here. So I don't know. I felt like they were building up to it. It was building and building. It was going to be this big dramatic finish. And then it was just this really flat camera angle of him backhanding the guy. I thought, oh, that's a bit of a letdown. It's probably, I don't know. They probably made the right decision not having Johnny do the kick, because that's Daniel's legacy, and he's kind of doing his own one, I suppose. but even still, it was a little bit of a letdown. It was building up, and I thought they're gonna fucking do it, and they didn't. There's a lot of references to Rocky in this as well, which the show has done many times. Has had scenes that are very reminiscent, even as far back as episode 1, season 1, where you have a driving montage like the No Easy Way Out scene from Rocky 4, but they use foreigners' head games, which is a great scene, and you get flashbacks to all the old films and everything. I think it was actually that scene that sealed the deal for me, that actually maybe this Cobra Kai series is pretty special and is a good legacy and is a good send up to the old stuff. And there's loads of references to Rocky in this series. There is a training montage when Johnny's getting ready to do the final fight. And of course, they saved it. I knew they would, because I think they've used every other song that has featured in the Karate Kid films in some way, more or less. Actually, no, I don't think they used the one from the end credits, Listen to Your Heart from Karate Kid 3. They haven't used that, I don't think. Peter Cetera's Glory of Love, I think one of the titles of the episode was Glory of Love. So they have referenced that in some way. But they haven't used sort of like the mainstay song from the franchise, which is You're the Best. You're the best around. Nothing's going to ever keep you down. They haven't used that yet, and I thought they're going to save that for the finale, aren't they? And they do. It's training montage. And they completely rip off Rocky. Not just the fact that it's a training montage, but the contents of that training montage. It rips off from Rocky 2 and from Rocky 3. So you have Daniel and Johnny running on the beach together, like Apollo Creed and Rocky from Rocky 3, and then frolicking in the waves, and in a glorious slow motion embrace that's totally not gay in any way, shape, or form. And then they also completely rip off Rocky 2, where, he's running through the streets, and, he has all the kids that are like running after him as well. They do that. So it's just unashamedly cliffing from that. And there's even a moment where Daniel takes Johnny aside and says, "You remember Rocky, right? How at the end of that film, it's not about him winning. It's the fact that he went the distance, and the things that really matter to him is that he got the girl, and, the love of his life is there waiting for him. Those are the main things. You haven't got to win. You haven't, just go the distance and give it your all. That's all you need to do." And I suppose it's kind of a nice tribute, because the director of Karate Kid did the first three Rocky films. It might have been the first 2, actually. Let me just check, because I know Stallone directed Rocky 4, but I can't remember if he did 3. Let me just check real quick. Yeah, he just did the first 2. Sorry, Rocky 1, 2, and 5, I think, was the director. Anyway, he did the Karate Kid film, so it makes sense that they reference Rocky, but I'm like, can you rein it back on the Rocky stuff? And how about you do stuff exclusive to Cobra Kai and get a cool legacy going on, and stop making me remember all of these 80s films? When Johnny Lawrence proposes to Carmen, because Carmen's mother is a God-fearing woman, and says that the child is a bastard because it was born out of wedlock, and you need to seal the deal, and you need to marry Carmen and make an honest woman out of her. So he decides to propose to her, and the song that he has some violinists come out and play, which segues into the background music of the episode, is "Take My Breath Away" from Top Gun. I'm like, okay, let's squeeze some more 80s references in there from other movies. Why not? I'm just going to have a bit of a pause and check your guys' comments real quick. So I think we're still debating which Muppets are playing which Lord of the Rings characters here. So, okay, so without weapons, I'm going to give the advantage to Johnny there. Because if he can beat the leader of the Iron Eagles, I keep saying Iron Eagles. If he can beat the leader of the Iron Dragons, then yeah, I think he's got Aragorn. Especially because Merry and Pippin got the jump on Aragorn in that one scene. Yes, bath time. That's a great shout. Yeah, Sam the Eagle as Saruman. Yeah, there you go. Even his name's kind of similar. So yeah, that works. Who could you have as like Bilbo? Maybe depends how much of the story you're telling. And what other characters are we missing? Because it would be a much shorter movie, wouldn't it? So I'm thinking if you were doing an adaptation of The Lord of the Rings in, say, like a 80 to 90-minute movie, you're going to have to cut a lot of stuff out. So I'm trying to think which characters would sort of be the main players. Oh, my word. Apologies. So you say Rizzo the Rat as Elrond. I don't know. See, I'd say Rizzo and Gonzo are part of your main two, aren't they? So I would say Merry and Pippin. I'd say Merry would be Gonzo and Rizzo would be Pippin. That's probably who I'd cast. And you've got Kermit as Frodo, and then you've got Fozzie as Sam. And I think those group. Oh yeah, you need There's Bunsen and Beaker, isn't there? You've mentioned Beaker. I think we need to get Bunsen in there somewhere as well. Bath Time says, a very good question, actually. Do they ever do anything with Will Smith's Spawn in this show? No. However, the next Karate Kid movie is going to be Karate Kid Legends, and that comes out this year. It's starring Ralph Macchio, Daniel LaRusso, and then it's also starring Jackie Chan from the 2010 version. I can't remember what he's called. I actually haven't seen that 2010 version. I stayed away from it because the original trilogy is so near and dear to my heart that I didn't want to watch a remake of it. But as far as I'm aware, in this new film, it's a brand new fighter. It's a brand new character who's been introduced, who they're both teaching. So Will Smith's name is attached to the show because he's a producer on it. But as far as I'm aware, I don't think Jaden Smith's going to be anywhere near these films, which is probably for the best. I'm trying to think what else I can talk about the show. Okay, one thing I really, really fucking hated about this show is what they ended up doing with Terry Silver and John Kreese. So throughout the series, Kreese, as I mentioned, has been going on this this quest of making amends and apologizing to everyone, and he's trying to amend for his evil ways very randomly. He's had a complete 180 as a character, essentially. And there is a fantastic scene. I think actually William Zabka did direct one of the episodes in the final 5 episodes. I think it was episode 2. The episode's called Rattled. But there's a moment where it's John Kreese and Johnny Lawrence come into contact with one another. And Johnny just kind of unloads like all of the pent up trauma that he's had over the years. And that he was like, you were an inspiration to me when you were my sensei. I looked up to you. I needed you. When I lost that match, I needed you more than ever. I needed you to tell me it was going to be okay. And instead you turned your back on me and, made me feel the loss of that fight even more. And after that, he just kind of went off the rails, and he was a down and out. He was a drunk. He didn't have a job. He didn't have a direction in life, and he was kind of a bum essentially. And he attributed all of that to that one fateful moment in the car park, where it's the beginning of Karate Kid 2, where John Kreese gets Johnny Lawrence in the headlock and punishes him for losing the match, and breaks his trophy. He's like, "You want the trophy?" and just breaks it. But they've recontextualized that now to give it a bit more emotional weight, I suppose. And it is the best acted scene, I think, in the whole show. And William Zabka really does give an emotional performance, as does John Kreese as well in that scene. And it is nice to see those characters kind of patch things up. And there's a moment, it reminded me actually of the scene from Good Will Hunting, where you have Robin Williams' character trying to console Matt Damon, saying it's not your fault. And he goes to sort of give him a hug and console him. And he's kind of resistant to it at first, and he breaks down crying. It very much reminded me of that, actually, where you have John Kreese saying, all I can do is apologize. Like, I can't change the past. It is what it is, but I am sorry for what I caused you from my actions. And as I say, it feels like it's a little bit too late, because we've had 6 seasons of this where Kreese has been an absolute son of a bitch and been absolutely deranged when it comes to revenge and getting his own back and trying to punish Johnny Lawrence and Daniel LaRusso. Now all of a sudden he's a goody two shoes and whatnot. But it is an incredibly well acted scene from both of the actors, and it is very emotional. and the two of them embrace, and it feels like that huge weight that Johnny, even after these 6 seasons, even after like 30 odd years, he's still carried with him, and he's suppressed, and just to get all of that out there. And it is very much like a father and son sort of rekindling their relationship, kind of that's how it feels. I can't remember if that's actually the episode where, or this might be later actually, where we get a flashback scene where Johnny goes to his mom's grave, and he's a drunk, and he says like, "I'm sorry that I'm such a fuck up, and I'm an absolute loser." And that's bookended really nicely at the end of the season, where he goes back to his mom's grave, and he lays some flowers on the grave and a picture of him as the champion. I thought that was nice. That's what I mean. Like, I like how the series remembered its roots, that this started off as a Johnny Lawrence show with Cobra Kai, and I like how they brought it back to that at the very end. What I didn't like was what they did with the very end of Kreese's character and Terry Silver. So after they lose the Sekai Taikai, Terry Silver's on his pleasure yacht, I guess, and he's freaking out, and he's pouring himself like a glass of scotch, and his hands are shaking, and he's like really, really pissed off and angry and hell-bent on revenge. And he says, "Right, I want you to send a message to Johnny Lawrence's family, like get his wife and newborn child or something and hold them hostage." He's coming up with like these horrible fucking plans. And he's telling these to his henchmen. He says, like, "Look, after I die, I haven't got long left to live. I've got like a couple of months. When I die, you get this yacht. It's all yours if you do this for me." So his henchman goes to leave, and then all of a sudden, the henchman's body is thrown down the stairs, and is apparently dead. I think his neck's broken or something. He looks, he kind of falls in a bloody heap at the bottom of the stairs. Terry Silver grabs a bottle, smashes it, and he goes up the stairs to investigate who killed his henchman, essentially. And I should have guessed it was Kreese, but the whole way through this episode, the whole way through these 5 episodes, even when it got to the finale, and I was kind of losing hope, even when it got to that last episode, I was really, really hoping for a Hilary Swank cameo in this. It feels like near enough every other character, every other actor that has appeared in one of these Karate Kid films at some point has returned in some way, shape, or form. They didn't really do anything with the next Karate Kid, which is always a film that I forget existed. But, there was another one where Mr. Miyagi's character trained the next Karate Kid, which was Hilary Swank. In fact, I think that may have been Hilary Swank's first ever role. And there's been numerous moments in the previous series where I'm like, oh my God, Hilary Swank is going to show up. And she didn't. I was like, what's Hilary Swank doing at the moment? Haven't seen her in a film in ages. She's probably doing some like TV show stuff, or maybe like theater or something. I don't know. Maybe she's busy. Maybe she's taking some time off. I don't know. But I was like, come on. You can devote like an afternoon to do a cameo for Cobra Kai. Like, just get her in there. Why not? And I thought, oh my God, has someone gone after Terry Silver, and is it Hilary Swank? Because this will be fucking glorious. It's not. It's John Kreese. John Kreese is there, and he says, I've come to end this once and for all, basically. And then Silver and John Kreese have this slanging match on the boat, and it's really hilarious, like the stunt double that they have for Kreese, because it's, he's clearly like years younger when you see the stunt double. And the two are fighting, and Kreese has got his classic cigar that he's smoking, and they're fighting right next to sort of like gas canisters. And, there's only one way that this can go. And there's like gasoline there as well. I don't know why all of this was stored on this boat in this one spot. It's okay. Anyway, they're fighting, they're scuffling, they knock over some of the gasoline. It starts pouring all over the deck. You know where this is going. And I think Terry Silver's sort of choking out Kreese, and Kreese is almost dying, and he's reaching for his cigar that's right there, that's still lit, and he grabs it and he throws it, and Kreese and Silver fucking blow up on this pleasure yacht. This yacht just ignites and fucking explodes like a nuclear bomb going off. And I just couldn't help but laugh. I thought that was how you write out Kreese and Silver. You couldn't think of anything to do with their characters. I think actually that happens in like the penultimate episode. And I do think it's a shame because I mean, I don't think you needed to end it that way. I don't think you needed to have them both blow the fuck up on a boat. I would have liked to have seen Silver's reaction to like Johnny winning at the end, for example, knowing that he's got to live out the last few months of his life in failure, and there's nothing he can do to change the result, and you know that's it. Maybe they just thought it could have been a sense of we don't know what to do with these characters. We don't know how to give them an ending because these characters have proven time and time again that they will not stop until they have won. They would just come up with like another revenge scheme and it would keep going on and on and on. So if you keep Silver and Kreese in the mix out there, even though Silver's only got a couple of months left to live and Kreese is now a changed man, is now a good guy, I don't feel like you needed to have them blow up. It just felt so ridiculous. Just thinking back to the legacy of those original 3 films and how far we've come, that this is how Terry Silver goes out. This is how we're ending that storyline. It just felt a little bit rushed. It felt like they were going for broke and they didn't really know what to do with those characters. So let's just have them fight on a yacht and blow up. And none of the characters even react to this. You never have any moment of Johnny Lawrence hearing what Kreese did for him, you know, protecting him essentially and killing Silver. You never have Daniel reacting to the news that Silver's dead. You never hear anything. It's so removed from everything that it just, yeah. I thought it was totally ridiculous, and I really didn't like how they did that part of the story towards the end. And then this show really kind of has that. I always offer this as a comparison, but I actually don't have a problem with the Return of the King. But Return of the King syndrome, where it's you know, you got ending after ending after ending, and it just keeps going on and on and on. Again, I don't have a problem with the Return of the King for doing that. I think, you know, a 20-minute ending for a 12-hour film series is fine. This one did seem like it kept dragging on a little bit. So I think you have Johnny going to the grave of his mom and saying like, I did it. And then it cuts to them in the it cuts to like all the different characters. It felt like the DLC ending of Mass Effect, where they just threw some like ending shots together of some of the characters. You have Sam going off to Okinawa, and Miguel tags along with her, at least for a couple of weeks before they have to part ways forever. You have Hawk and Dimitri. Dimitri's now back with his super hot girlfriend, which is ridiculous and would never happen. I can't remember, are they going to like the same college together now? So Hawk and Dimitri are still going to be together. Nothing with Kenny, nothing with Devon. They're just there. You have Tori and Robbie, who are both hired by this company who do like endorsements and like sports media things like that. Like they'll get them on commercials and posters and merchandise and supplements and whatnot, and they sign them up with this very lucrative deal where they're essentially going to be millionaires. So they've kind of made it on top. They were kind of like the 2 down and outs that really struggled throughout life, but ultimately they've come out on top with you know, millions and millions. You got Johnny, who's settling down for his new life. Daniel, who's kind of carrying on with his life, and that's it really. Then it ends. There's another ending scene where Johnny is teaching his first class, his first Cobra Kai class after everything that's gone down. He's back to being a sensei, and he is kind of turning into Kreese. I think it was meant to be like this cool ending to the series, but in many ways, it felt like he is becoming the villain he was trying to stop. He is becoming another John Kreese. You know, he's like, fear does not exist in this dojo. And he's like, hey, Four Eyes, get a different pair of glasses or lose them. You look like a fucking idiot. Like, you know, and he's just bullying all of his students, which I think he has done before. You know, he's kind of tough love with them. But yeah, how he's kind of pacing up and down the ranks. I thought, ooh, this isn't a good look for Johnny, really. But and then you think, okay, that's the end. And then the title comes up, Cobra Kai, and you're like, okay, that's the ending. You know, he's teaching his class. And then we get another scene, which feels like it should have been an after credit scene, but they just wanted to cram it in there. And it's Johnny and Daniel, and I think they're like eating sushi or something. They're at some kind of like Asian cuisine place, and he mentions that there's a letter, and I thought, have they filmed this scene to tie in with the upcoming film? I thought it was going to be a letter from Jackie Chan's character summoning Daniel to wherever it's going to be set in the film. And I thought, okay, maybe this is just like a little stinger kind of thing to set you up for that film. And then maybe it will say like Daniel LaRusso will return in Karate Kid Legends. But it's not that. And it's just like another member berry gag from the first film, how you had Mr. Miyagi who was trying to catch the fly with the chopsticks. And he's like, he who catch fly with chopstick accomplish anything in life. And then Daniel manages to catch one straight away, much to Mr. Miyagi's dismay. And you have Daniel LaRusso, he snaps off the chopsticks and he goes, right, okay, for old time's sake, let's see if I can do it. And just as he's about to get it, Johnny Lawrence comes back to the table, claps his hands, kills the fly, and says, like, I got it. And that's it. And then it ended. And that's the end of Cobra Kai. So I guess just to sum up my thoughts a little bit with this one is that I think that out of the 3 parts that they released, the 3 batches of 5 episodes, the final 5 are definitely a lot better. It's definitely more character focused, and there's actually scenes in there that I enjoy. However, I do think that season 6 overall is easily the weakest. I think it was dragged out over 15 episodes. I think there were a lot of sort of plot cul-de-sacs and meandering storylines that really didn't amount to much and could have been removed almost entirely. In part 2, where you have that pointless detour, where again they were trying to just redo a Rocky 2 moment, where Carmen has complications with the pregnancy, and Johnny and Miguel have to get back on a plane and fly back and check that she's okay. And she's like, yeah, I'm fine. Now go and win. And then you get back on a plane and they go back to Barcelona. I'm like, what was the point of that? It just completely derailed the plot. You have the whole Mr. Miyagi storyline in part 1 and throughout part 2 where they're trying to vilify him. And then it just ultimately ends with, oh no, he wasn't actually a bad guy after all. And now Sam has a pearl necklace. I'm like, okay, great. There's also, I forgot to mention with this as well, there's a whole, Chosen is just reduced to comic relief now at this point. When he was introduced into it, it was actually like a really badass reintroduction to his character, and he was clearly carrying a lot of pain with him. He gets completely friend zoned by Kumiko, who just says, oh, I like you as a friend. And he kind of goes off the rails a little bit. And then Amanda and Daniel try and set him up with a blind date. And I forgot the name of the actress. I think it's the actress who was in Saved by the Bell and Showgirls, if you remember that film. I remember that film very well. And she shows up and she's like the mom of Moon's character in this, and she's all hippy dippy and tarot cards and energies and crystals and whatnot. And Chosen's really resentful at the idea of having to do this blind date with her, essentially. But then the two of them kind of connect, but he says, actually, my heart belongs to another. So the last shot we get of Chosen is that he goes to meet Kim. Remember Kim, who I talked about at the beginning of this review? Yeah, she does absolutely nothing this whole season. Well, in these 5 episodes at least, in that she kills her grandfather in order to assert herself as the leader of this dojo so that she can teach it her own way and kind of abandon the violent ways of the past. And I kept thinking, like, is she going to come back into it? Is she going to, like, join the crew again? Are we going to get her back? And no. She's just there, and then Chosen goes out to visit her. And then the two of them are like, oh, okay, let's get it on. Let's get this thing going. And that's it. That's Chosen's character. So he just felt like they completely reduced him to comic relief. He talked about watching, was it like Home Improvements or something, or some like really bad reality TV shows. So it just felt like a bit of a waste of opportunity with his character. I kept expecting Mike Barnes to come back into it after season 5. I thought they'd sort of get the whole gang back together for the ending, and they really didn't with his character. So I think, looking back, is Cobra Kai worth it? Yeah, I think its strengths definitely outweigh its weaknesses. It is a shame that it is, and then this kind of goes the way of many TV shows, the diminishing returns as it drags on and on and on. I think that sort of the end of season 5 was kind of where it peaked, where Terry Silver comes back and they have this big sort of like end game fight with Terry Silver. That's I think where it probably should have ended. Silver gets arrested at the very end, and I feel like that's where it should have ended. And then season 6 just feels a little bit drawn out. The writing just the same magic and the same writing just isn't there. Not that it was ever fucking Shakespeare, but just the rules of things and logic of things has just been completely just stretched to the max. Endless fight scenes in this final season, which seems to detract from everything else. And yeah, I think it does stick the landing, though, for the most part. As I've mentioned, there are some aspects about the finale in the last few episodes that I don't like, especially to do with Kreese and Silver's finale there and sort of lackluster payoffs to some of the plot lines. But overall, it's a very good show. I like that it remembered its roots, and I like that it went back to being about Cobra Kai and Johnny at the very end. And I am glad that they have finished this season now, because it was, yeah, season 6 was bad. It was overall, it was a very bad season, but it did have some okay moments sprinkled in there. And I just like these characters. I love Terry Silver. I like Kreese, and I like Johnny Lawrence's character. So, and I think overall it is a good send up to the original trilogy. Certainly better than some things. Looking at the Star Wars sequel trilogy, for fuck's sake, my god, or like the Dial of Destiny, where it seems to hate all of its original characters, whereas this one actually felt like a nice, good continuation, and it builds them up. And yeah, I mean the old characters in this, the old characters are just easily the draw for me, and I never really gravitated to many of the newbies, with maybe the exception of like Tori and Robbie and whatnot, but. Yeah, that's Cobra Kai. So, speculation, do we think they're going to have spin-off shows with this? I expect that Stranger Things will. Stranger Things is gearing up for its 5th and final season, I believe, this year as well. And that will undoubtedly get spin-offs after the fact as well, because it's Netflix's biggest moneymaker. I think this was pretty successful too. Now, I know that the legacy of, well, as they say, Cobra Kai never dies, which they like to remind us of. Karate Kid certainly never dies, because as I mentioned, we've got Karate Kid Legends coming out this May, and I think depending on how well that does will kind of influence as to whether we're going to get any more of those films going forward. It'd be nice to see Jackie Chan again in something. It's been a while since I've seen Rush Hour 3, so it'll be nice to see Jackie Chan in a movie again. I think any references to Cobra Kai are going to be very minimal when it comes to Daniel LaRusso's character. In fact, I really don't think there will be any. Obviously, it is set after Cobra Kai, but I don't think they're going to do anything to necessarily tie it straight back in with the series. I think they'll be talking about the original film and, you know, his training with Miyagi and whatnot, and I don't think it's going to go beyond that. So I'll have a review for that when it comes out. I'll be there day one if I can, watching that film, and I'll probably actually do a review on the 2010 one with Jackie Chan, because as I mentioned, I haven't seen that one. It's the only it's the only Karate Kid film at the moment that I haven't seen, is that one, and I feel like I'll watch that to influence my opinion when it comes to the new one coming out. As whether I think Cobra Kai will get any spin-offs, unsure at this point. I think there are some particular characters that they could maybe spin off, but I don't think they'll be particularly interesting. I don't really want to see Sam and Miguel's incredibly exciting exploits in Okinawa. Don't need to see that. Chosen and Kim in their dojo, no. And Johnny Lawrence's story's kind of been completed, as has Daniel's. So I feel like it's kind of done, and I'm okay with that. But it's a fun series overall. I'll probably buy these when they come out on Blu-ray, maybe, or like a complete collection, just to have them in my set. Why not? But yeah, I'm all Cobra Kai'd out now, and that's okay. It's okay for things to end, and let's hope it stays ended. Let's have a look. Bath Time says, you ever seen the show Community? You not only love it, but has a great episode about the Karate Kid as a play. I have seen Community a long, long time ago. It was recommended to me by someone on the channel that shall not be named, and I watched the entire series. I think it peaked around season 3 for me, and then I think season 4, I actually didn't mind season 4. I know it had a different writer or a different director or whatnot, and everyone shits on season 4. I actually didn't mind season 4. For me, season 5 and 6, where they kept rotating the core cast out, because you become attached to that community, right? That group of characters, and when they kept switching them out, I just kind of lost interest a little bit towards the end. But overall, I think I did enjoy Community, even though it did kind of peter out a little bit. Bath Time says the channel that should not be named. Law Masters care to explain? No, not right now. Not right now. But the show that, for those of you who know, you will know. Bath Time says, I love the first 3 seasons, few highlights after that, but a great series. Yeah, no, overall, definitely I enjoyed it. I like that core cast of the characters. The first 3 are pretty special, and I really enjoyed seeing how those characters reacted with each other. Season 4 did drop a little bit, but I don't hate it as much as a lot of people do. And then 5, because you had like Mike Ehrmantraut, didn't you, from Breaking Bad in one of the seasons? Because I think Chevy Chase is notoriously difficult to work with and probably got fired. Or didn't he say like a few things or something, so they had to fire him or something? They got Mike in from Breaking Bad, and then I think in another series there was another character. So yeah, when they kept switching them out, I kind of lost interest. They do kept teasing, don't they? 6 seasons in a movie. So we've had the 6 seasons, but we haven't had the movie yet. So maybe that will happen at some point. Bath Time says feels a bit like Heroes, amazing 20 episodes and then clinging on to past glories. Yeah, Heroes was good for exactly 1 season. And then, oh my God. I think I watched the first 4 seasons of that, but then they brought it back, didn't they? It randomly got resurrected for 1 season, then I think it got cancelled again. So I think I watched the first 4. Season 4 was one where you had like a carnival and like a ringmaster Jippo kind of character in there. I think that was the last one I watched. Oh, that was it. Yeah. So regarding Chevy Chase, yeah, he said on set they would make his character say the N-word, but use the actual N-word. Yeah. I watched the revival, but couldn't tell you anything about it. Yeah, it just seemed like a little too late. I was like, oh, Heroes, of all the shows that get a revival, that one gets a revival. Maybe it was because of the current superhero movie boom, and they thought, oh, maybe we can get in on this, and it just never really took off, did it? Yeah, Bath Time says they're remaking Buffy as well with Sarah Michelle Gellar is going to be interesting. So I've never actually watched Buffy and Angel. I have watched the first 2 episodes of Buffy, and I have seen the watch order. How I think you watch the first 3 seasons of Buffy, and then you have to kind of interchange between the 2. It is a show that I'd really like to watch because I've heard fantastic things about it. I know that the show definitely has its low points, but I've heard overall it's very good. And the writing's pretty good for some of the characters. It's a huge undertaking, though. It's a lot of episodes and jumping back and forth between seasons and whatnot. So I was thinking maybe I could do a review series on that at some point. If I never know how to really review TV shows like that, because for a lot of them, especially when there's a lot of episodes per season, I think there's like 20 episodes per season, it'd be a bit boring to do reviews based on every single individual episode. So I feel like you kind of need to watch all 20 episodes and then review the series as a whole. But I don't know if after all this time people would be interested in seeing that. So maybe it's just a show that I can just kind of run on in the background, perhaps. Bath Time says, Buffy was great when I was younger. I don't know how it holds up, but it's had a huge amount of research and academic stuff published. Yeah, I bet it has. I know there's been like various spin-offs, haven't they, like comics and whatnot, and maybe novels as well. I'm not even sure. I didn't dislike the first 2 episodes. I think it's one that I think it starts very villain of the week, probably initially, in its early stages, and then develops into something more as the writing gets a little bit more complex. But I thought it was fine. It's very, very of its time when you watch it again now, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. It had an incredible musical episode. I think that kind of set the stage for musical episodes, didn't it? A lot of shows now try and get in on that, I think. I know of a few other examples, I think, of shows that have done that since then. Bath Time says, I think TV reviews only work when it's current. You have to kind of review seasons if it's not current. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with that. So, yeah, not ruling it out. It could be something I could do in the future. Right, I think I'm probably going to round off there, guys. So thank you to everyone that tuned in, commented, and Bath Time, appreciate you. You've got me really wanting Muppets Lord of the Rings now, a film that unfortunately will never happen, and it makes me very, very sad. But, you mentioned, yeah, sorry, I was just going to get to your Dune comment because I missed that, didn't I? Bath Time says, do you like Dune? The TV show I thought was really good. I've never read the books. I've tried to listen to the first audiobook about 3 times, and I always get distracted by something else, usually Tolkien. I know that Tolkien didn't particularly like Dune, but it is a series of books that I do want to get into at some point. The newer ones that came out, like I think they're well-made movies, Dune Part 1 and Part 2. However, overall, I don't think they're a good adaptation. There are certain things with Part 2 that I felt could have been implemented into Part 1 to allow for a bit of a smoother transition between two parts. I thought the ending of Part 2 was completely rushed, and changed entirely. And I feel like they're setting up Zendaya to be this, Ubermensch girl boss spin-off movie by the end of that film. And that's not, as far as I'm aware, that's not what happens to Chani's character at all. My favorite adaptation, probably controversially, is the 1980s one. I absolutely love that film. I think, despite its limitations, budgetary and by the studio and whatnot, to take a book of that length and that complexity with as much lore as it has and say, right, you've got to produce a 2-hour movie or however long that first movie is. I thought they actually adapted it really well. Yeah, they have to gloss over some things. There is an extended cut out there, and I know that someone's produced a fan edit, I think, where they've taken the deleted scenes and I think they've cleaned them up a little bit. So as far as I'm aware, there's the normal version, and then there might be like a director's cut version or some other kind of extended version which has like illustrations and a bit more of a prologue at the beginning explaining the history in the book and what's it called, the Butlerian Jihad, is that it, where like the machines took over or whatever it was, or people overthrew the machines, whatever it was. There's an extended version with that also has some extra deleted scenes in there, and those deleted scenes are pretty much all from the book. So I think it's on YouTube. Someone did produce a fan edit where they've got rid of all of the illustrations, but they've got all of the deleted scenes. And I think it's a wonderful adaptation. Yeah, it's really hokey, and the Harkonnens are a bit dumb, and you've got that guy who's inflating around the ceiling, and he looks really gross, and it is very wacky. But I love the sets in that. I love the practical models. The soundtrack is fucking outstanding. Toto's score to that by far completely demolishes Hans Zimmer, in my opinion. Hans Zimmer's is fine, like it's functional for the movie, but you've just got that main. Like, other than that, I couldn't tell you another bit of music from that. It just kind of falls into the doldrums of modern Hans Zimmer, of that Man of Steel percussive, just nondescript drums and just noise, and it's not particularly melodic or musical to me. Toto's score, especially the final song, I think you have like Chani and Paul's love theme, which is really nice, and a bit of a prelude into Take My Hand, and then the final closing one, as cheesy and sort of Flash Gordon-y and Queen-like as it is towards the end. I actually really like that kind of rock opera soundtrack that they produced for it. It's really good stuff. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on Dune. See, actually, you're the first person I've heard that's really complimented that show. For the most part, I've heard some people say that, if it's not full of agendas, it's just kind of boring. It's just a bit of a boring trudge. So I don't know. I don't know enough about the lore to see how accurate that show is. And I wonder if the TV show spin-off is really a story that needs to be told. Is it just Warner Brothers milking this franchise at this point? But then again, I know there's a lot of stories. You got the Benny Gesserit, which I think is what this show's based on, isn't it? Isn't it set so many thousands of years in the past, or hundreds of years in the past, or something? So it's not really related to any of the current day things that are happening in the Dune canon, as of the films at least. I think Villeneuve's probably working on the next Dune film, isn't he? Is it Dune Messiah, I think, is the next one? It'd be really interesting to see if they continue it after that, because you're going to have the children of Paul, and then doesn't one of those turn into like a giant fucking sandworm? So I've heard it gets weird. I've heard it gets incredibly weird. So yeah, we'll see. Bath Time says, get everything in Middle Earth and do a Muppet casting show. So I have actually messaged him. There's a couple of video ideas that we really want to do. We want to review a few more of those Lord of the Rings fan films. I think there's a Hunt for Gollum one that we really want to do. And the recent news that season 3 of Rings of Power has been confirmed, and there's going to be a time jump and the things that it's going to be set on. So yeah, I'm going to drop him another message and see if he can get a video out this week sometime, because I haven't spoken to him for a while, actually, and it'd be really good to do another video with him. I haven't spoken to him since War of the Rohirrim, since we did our review on that, actually, so hope he's keeping well, and yeah, I'll drop him a message and hopefully we can get another collaboration together. Yeah, Bath Time says the jealous girlfriend bit of Zendaya was incredibly stupid. Totally, and she's basically... she's kind of his concubine, isn't she? In many ways, what Paul's mother was to Paul's father, in that Paul marries the princess. I can't remember what her name is. Florence Pugh's character, doesn't he? Like, he marries her because of her standing and her wealth, and basically asserts himself as emperor, the god emperor, isn't he? But his heart belongs to Chani, so he says that you're the woman that I will be with, and I will be with no other woman. I'm just married to her over there, good old Florence Pugh, just for status and for name and credibility alone. So I think, well, that's how the old 80s one ends with the extended edition, and I'm assuming that's how it goes. And I think from that point on, from what I've heard, Chani's just really docile and is just kind of there in the background, but Hollywood seems hell-bent on trying to make Zendaya a thing, so they're going to change her storyline completely now that she's riding off on Shai Hulud on her own. So Bath Time says there's an adaptation called Children of Dune on Sci-Fi Channel with the younger Professor X, and it's fantastic, to be honest. Yeah, I did actually hear there was another Dune adaptation. It's one that always gets overlooked, isn't it? There's always the 80s one and then the new one, and I did hear about that. So granted, the budget, again, is going to be an issue, but I probably will check that out at some point just to see what they do. Yeah, that was it. The Butlerian Jihad was AI. It's basically like Terminator, isn't it? I guess in many ways. Math Time says, I think the unmade version of Dune was one of the most important films never made, as Alien, Blade Runner, etc. All recycled parts of it. Yeah, a lot of hate towards the show comes from the fact it's not Frank Herbert; it's an adaptation from his son's work. Oh, I've heard about his son's work and how it's not very good, which is kind of making me resist reading the books in some way, which I don't think it should. But I hate when I start things, whether I start a TV show or whatever, and I'm completely invested in it, and then it gets cancelled, or some studio shit happens where all of a sudden it just ends without a conclusive finish. And I feel like I don't want to invest all of my time if it's not going to have an ending. And I know that it does have an ending. His son finished it, but before you read I think it's the 2 final books, isn't it, that his son finished? Before you read those books, you have to read the spin-off books that his son wrote, because they filter into the 2 final parts. And apparently the writing is just really, really fucking bad. I don't know if it's just like a really anticlimactic ending, or if the nuance of the writing just isn't there. If it's a bit like the Star Wars sequel trilogy. So do I just read the stuff that Frank Herbert wrote and just accept that there is no ending to it, even though it ends on a cliffhanger? Or do I then finish the series with probably a massively lackluster ending? You pick your poison. Season 3 with a time jump straight to Sauron in Chains of Numenor. I guess so, yeah. Which I'm not even mad at them for doing, really. I'm mad at everything else they do, because they just completely butcher the lore. But the stuff that they're pulling from, and the nature of it, in the how long elves last for and events and whatnot, they've already played fast and loose with the timeline of everything else, especially the dwarven stuff is ridiculous. But there are massive time jumps within the Silmarillion and within the Second Age, where all of a sudden in the next sentence a few millennia have gone by. So I'm fine with them doing a time jump if that's what they feel like, but I feel like they're just trying to rush to, the One Ring and the stuff that audiences are going to want to see. They're going to try and distance themselves from what came before, maybe. Whether this is going to be their excuse to, especially with the political landscape in the US changing now, whether they're thinking, right, this shit isn't going to sell. We need to kind of rebrand everything from scratch. So season 3, with the added effect of a time jump, is almost going to be like a soft reboot within the series. I don't know, but how it's going so far on these showrunners, I think they're just going to double down. I think it's just going to be exactly more of the same of what we've had already, to be honest. Bath Time says, I watched 40 minutes of War of the Rohirrim and that was enough for me. I do not blame you at all. I completely agree. Yeah, this is in regards to Dune. He marries Princess Irulan. That's it, Irulan. And she drugs Chani to not have kids, but Chani understands the situation and isn't that bothered. Ooh, God. That was a bit dark. I didn't know it went that route. But the arranged marriage, she's a bit miffed she can't have kids. Yeah, well, I bet, yeah. Bath Time says I wouldn't. So Paul's kids then, they're with Princess Irulan. Is that right? Or am I missing something? Or does Chani have the kids first and then after she has Paul has 2 kids, doesn't he, I think? Does she drug her after that? Bath Time says, I wouldn't go into the books, to be honest. It just gets so stupid and carries on into a very uninteresting conclusion. Fair enough. Do you think I could get away with maybe reading Dune and the sequel? I keep forgetting. Is Dune Messiah the second one? Do you think because he wrote the first one as like a self-contained thing, right? And then it was probably massively successful, which is one of the reasons he chose to do a sequel. But I heard that people weren't really getting the message as to what he was trying to get across, that Paul is this now like deranged, terrifying Messiah-like figure, hell-bent on war and everything, and has become like a god emperor essentially. So he had to write the sequel to make sure that people understood the meaning and the message of what the first one was. So do you think I could do the first 2 Dune books and end it there? Or does the end of that second book then lead you into the third, and then that leads you into the fourth, and before you know it, you're reading all of them? Bath Time says, one thing I'd like you and Everything Middle-earth to possibly do would be to talk about the changes in the Jackson trilogy and how it would go down today and which were good and bad. That's a really good topic, actually, because I agree with you. I think there are some things now with the landscape that we're in where we're kind of privy towards these changes a little bit more, where things like boosting Arwen's importance and turning her into a bit of a girl boss in that first movie. Now if I heard that was being done in an adaptation, I probably would be really pissed off hearing some things like that. But yet it kind of works in the Fellowship, and it's probably the right decision. Maybe I'm just saying that because that's how I've always, the Fellowship of the Ring was the first film that I watched, and that got me into Lord of the Rings in the first place. I didn't start by reading the books, it was that film. So yeah, no, I think that's a really good. I'll pitch that to him. I'll see if he's replied to me actually, and if not, I'll drop him a message tomorrow and see how he's doing. Bath Time says he wrote up till Dune Charterhouse and is stopped during the God Emperor stuff because it was just getting ridiculous. Why did it get so ridiculous then? Did Frank Herbert find mind-bending hallucinogenic drugs or something? Was it the 70s? I can't remember when he died. Did he live through the 70s? Bath Time says I'd end with Children of Dune. That's the third one, isn't it? Is that the third book? Bath Time says, meat's back on the menu, boys, is obviously a ridiculous line that's against Tolkien, but it's also brilliant. Yeah, and that's the thing. And I think people have a lot more wiggle room with Peter Jackson and the changes that he did with the Lord of the Rings trilogy over The Hobbit. So lines like that, for example, is an example, is testament to that, how it's so against Tolkien and what he stood for and what those books did. Legolas riding down the staircase on a shield is ridiculous, but it's also really, really fucking badass. So yeah, there are a lot of examples of that in the Lord of the Rings where, I don't know, it's usually either a cool factor or just like a meme factor at this point, I think, are the two things that you can kind of weigh your opinion on with that. Yeah, Bath Time says, I still hate what they did to Denethor with all my soul. There's one scene in particular that I can't fucking stand with Denethor. And I get, like the film, if it needs to vilify him a little bit more to do what it needs to do, maybe they thought if they make him more morally grey, that's going to make the audience a bit, give credit to your audience. I think we could keep up. I would have liked to have seen a more, just someone who has lost hope and is less of a villain. They definitely really dial that up to 11, don't they, in the film? But the one scene that really pisses me off, and it gets a big reaction out of the audience, and this is the thing, maybe it is the right decision for moviegoers because it really kickstart that moment in the film. It's the bit where he says, abandon your posts, flee for your lives, and then Gandalf just smacks him really comedic like, and he's like, oh, as Gandalf is like smacking him with the staff. I'm like, you have the guard of the steward stood around as Gandalf actually physically attacks Denethor, and not a one of them does a thing. What you needed was, you could have just played that so much more subtly. You could have just had him go like, abandon your post, flee for your lives, and then it just cuts to Gandalf looking really concerned or angry, and then it just cuts to Gandalf doing his own thing and defying the laws of Denethor. And if I was doing a fan edit, which I do want to do at some point once I actually have some fucking free time and get my updated Hobbit done, which I am still working on. I've actually got this week off for half term, so I'm hoping to advance a little bit more with that. I do want to do a Lord of the Rings fan edit at some point, and that will be one of the first scenes that I change because I hate that moment. But as I say, it gets a reaction out of the audience, doesn't it? They're like, yeah, because we hate Denethor, so you beat the shit out of him and you get in the fight, Gandalf. So that scene does what it needs to for a film. It's that shot of adrenaline, like, fuck yeah, we're going to war, let's do this now. Enough waiting around, but kind of at the detriment of the source material and what Tolkien stood for. So, there's quite a few moments in the extended edition of Return of the King, actually, which, whilst one of the greatest films ever made, ain't going to deny that. Of course they are. They're my favourite 3 films ever made, right there, back there on those posters. But they did get steadily more and more ridiculous, and there's some comedic stuff which I'm not too keen on with Gimli in the Return of the King. The stuff at the Paths of the Dead, I think, is a little bit too much, and I feel if they were going to throw some jokes in there, I feel like they didn't need to be as drawn out as they are. The bit where he's like walking through the ghosts, and he's like, you could do that once maybe, but it just feels really drawn out. And the bit where he's walking on the bones and everything too. I much prefer the theatrical cut of where we don't see the Army of the Dead's reaction. We don't see their answer, whether they did actually join in the fight with Aragorn when he says, what say you? And we cut back to the battle, and we don't see that again till those ships show up. So it's actually a surprise when Aragorn jumps off. In the extended edition where we see them board the boats, it just completely nullifies that surprise at the end for me. So there's some aspects of the theatrical cut I do prefer. Let's see, Bath Times says, like, no one who just watches the trilogy makes the connection between Denethor losing his son and Theoden losing his son, and it really annoys me. Yeah, the thing that I think people always draw reference to is the Merry and Pippin side of things, how they have very similar storylines, and you have Merry swearing allegiance to Rohan and Pippin swearing allegiance to Gondor. But it never really goes beyond that, and I do think that is kind of mishandled a little bit. Because with the films as well, you'd have the fact that, now that the 2 towers are Orthanc and Barad-dûr, which I know isn't what they were going for in the books, but you have Theoden under the influence of Saruman. So this external evil is possessing and feeding him with, lies and deceptions and false informations and whatnot to completely break him and demoralize him. And in the case of the films, literally possess him. They make it a literal thing in the movie. But then on the flip side, you also have a very similar thing with Denethor, how he has the Palantir, and he's clearly been in direct communication with Sauron, and again, that influence and images being placed in his head and whatnot, and that slow degradation of his character, especially exacerbated over the loss of his son. Denethor really is a mirror image to what Theoden could have been had he have not been, exercised, if you will, by Gandalf or got back into the fight. There's, Denethor kind of symbolizes futility and passivity, and Theoden's all about action and actually stepping up and against innumerable odds, literally shouting death, is battle cry, but still taking it head on. It's a wonderful little parallel, and yeah, I do think it is. Although it's hinted at in the movies, in the extended edition, I don't think it really sticks the landing with that. So I agree with that too. Bathtime says the Ent Drought stuff is one of the only deleted scenes I'm very happy they didn't include. Yeah, I mean it's a nice homage to the Bombadil stuff, I suppose. You've got Old Man Willow, and a lot of Treebeard's lines are taken from Tom Bombadil. So even though Tom Bombadil isn't in there, at least they've kind of included it in a way. But then the purist in me is like, why are we doing the whole Tom Bombadil and Old Man Willow stuff when we're in Fangorn? Like, what are we doing? So, yeah. I mean, when I'm watching them, I always watch the extended versions anyway. But yeah, I agree. It probably, almost certainly doesn't need to be there, does it? Bathtime says Denethor is the only mortal that could resist the will of Sauron. It's such a miss for me. Yeah, that's a good point. It's a really great point there, actually. So you have his son who denies the ring, and Denethor resists the will of Sauron himself. So I don't know, but they definitely do big up the whole corruption thing of the ring and how everyone is susceptible to it. So already in the movie, you have Bilbo who resists the ring, Sam who resists the ring. Let's see who else. Gandalf in a way, because he's offered it. Galadriel resists it. Aragorn resists it at the end of Fellowship. Let's see. So so they already have a few characters doing that, and I think if you keep adding to that list and you have Faramir, as soon as it's offered him, he's like, oh no, I don't want to touch that thing. I'm okay. I don't need it. I'm like, it's one of the reasons that I actually don't mind what they do with Faramir and the Two Towers. It does feel a bit like they're treading water with the Sam and Frodo storyline. And to me, it is the least interesting story. Oh, I like Treebeard. It's complicated. I don't know. I see. I like the payoff of the Treebeard stuff, and Treebeard's actually my favorite character within the Lord of the Rings book. But maybe some of those do drag in the movie, perhaps a little bit. So I don't know, but it does feel like it's treading water just a little bit. But I actually really like Faramir's arc in that movie, and I appreciate that they do have him falling to it, but then does end up resisting it in a way. So it does get to that point from the book. It's just not an immediate thing. And I actually appreciate that, because to me that still adds to the rising tension and corrupting power of the ring itself. And it's still prevalent within the story. If you just have everyone that can just outright resist it, then to me that just ruins the power. Because the One Ring, in my opinion, is just like a character unto itself, and it has to have that sort of malignant presence throughout the movie. It's one of the reasons that I'm glad they got rid of Tom Bombadil, is that, when he's going like, and he's like putting on the ring and he's not turning invisible, it's like, what are we doing? what are we trying to say here? So. Bathlem says they moved it around. I feel they missed the Shelob stuff in Two Towers. Well, I mean, that's just down to the structure, isn't it? I think when you do it chronologically, everything still takes place when it was meant to. I mean, Sam and Frodo shouldn't have gone to Osgiliath. That shouldn't have happened. They shouldn't have been there. But still, like when they fight Shelob, it's kind of around the same time as everything else is meant to happen in the book. So I'm not too fussed about them doing it that way. I think it would have been weird if they'd just, we just follow all of Merry and Pippin's storyline, then we just follow all of Aragorn's storyline. That works for a book. I don't think that works for a movie. So I'm actually happy that they did it in a sequential way. And I'm quite happy with how they juggled it around. I don't think it would have worked having like the Battle of Helm's Deep happening at the same time, and then we cut away, and then Frodo's fighting Shelob and being taken to the tower and whatnot in oh god, I'm forgetting the fucking name. Cirith Ungol. Jesus, it's been a long day. I need to brush up on my Tolkien. Clearly, Christ Almighty, I'm forgetting things. Or maybe it's just old age, who knows, or all of the above. Bath Time says, yeah, happy to skip Tom, not happy to skip the Scouring of the Shire. Yeah, I don't know. I'm torn on the Scouring of the Shire because I think the ending of the movie, as it is very, very accurate to what real life soldiers would have gone through returning from World War One, in that they've witnessed all these horrors. They're completely, psychologically and physically changed from everything that happened. And they get back home and everyone's blissfully unaware and carrying on as normal. And they just can't adjust to this new world. And they don't really get the respect or acknowledgement for their deeds. And I think that's wonderful. And I think it's that scene where they're all sat in the Green Dragon and the humdrum of life is happening around them, and without a single line of dialogue, they're all looking at each other, and you know exactly what they're thinking and how they've changed. I think that's wonderfully done. However, I do agree for the book, the Scouring of the Shire is probably better, although it tacks on like a little bit of an extra like DLC thing at the end. Like, we've overthrown Sauron, we've saved the day, everyone's happy, and then, oh no, now we've got to contend with Saruman and Grima and those swarthy men completely enslaving the Shire, and it's like, oh, okay, what are we doing? It makes the Hobbits heroes at home. Like, the effects of war even affect the Shire in some way. And I think that works for the book, maybe. Lobelia Sackville Baggins gets a great fucking redemption arc at the end of that too, which is great. And I really like how sort of like the poetic final imagery of Saruman's death as well. I think it's explained like when he gets stabbed and it's almost like his soul is leaving this earth. Was it like it felt like something was trying to move towards the west, like his soul's trying to go back to where it came from, and then a wind just blows Saruman's spirit away and sort of denies him entry into the west. And after all of his deeds, I love that imagery, that final imagery there, and like the spiritual side of Tolkien's world at work there. So yeah, positives and negatives to both, I think. Battime says, I've got to do a show at 8. I have to go, but lovely to chat as always. You too, man. I haven't thought about our collaboration. We'll definitely get something off the ground at some point. We'll think of a good subject to do. I'm going to round off there anyway. I finished talking about Cobra Kai maybe half hour ago. So thank you to everyone who tuned in. Appreciate the comments. And yeah, I'll be back with another live stream very soon. Take care, everyone.